Murrah building, and finally arrives in the form of two basic Rayleigh wave signals observed at Norman. This is a phenomenon called surface wave dispersion, in which low frequencies travel faster than the high frequencies, and the buildup, part of the buildup of this second signal, it may be attributed to a phenomenon that's called an Airy phase, A-I-R-Y, Airy, after the gentleman who discovered the idea. So that this observation of two signals is indeed related to a single, apparently continuous episode of seismic activity at the Murrah building, as suggested in a previous USGS press release. However, the discrepancy between the length of time the air blast was in action tells us that this first period represents a time when the truck was actually exploding. And the second period then is a period of time in which additional vibration was taking place that is not explained by the truck bomb. Now, here I've drawn a cartoon picture of two people close to a floor. One of them yells hello, and the other is listening with one ear to the floor and one ear up. And what he should hear coming through the ground is the word hello, and what he should hear coming through the air later, because the speed of sound in air is slower, is the word hello. And in terms of drawing that out as a seismogram, you would draw a seismogram, and here the first arrival would be the ground wave, GW, which comes in the form of the word hello. And then the later arrival, the air wave, comes in and says the word hello. The signals received at the omniplex are not that way. The ground wave comes through and says, hello, how are you? Whereas the air blast only says hello. This is a cartoon illustration of the basic idea used, but the extra time of ground motion at the Murrah building is clearly indicated by the discrepancy between these two signals.
April the 19th was the second year anniversary of the Waco incident. Was this a significant date for the ATF? Did they have prior knowledge of a bomb threat? How many of them were in the Alfred P. Murrah building at the time of the explosion?
I had asked them if, based on my knowledge subsequent to the explosion of April 19th, it never occurred to them before the bombing that April 19th was a day that they needed to pay attention and be on alert and be on guard. And of course, the two agents in my house, Luke Franny and Mr. Collar, both said no, said it never occurred to them. Said, not an inkling of problems. Well, that was really interesting because 2 hours later, this meeting took place at my home about 10 o'clock that morning. It was over with by about 10, well, it was at 9 o'clock, it was over with by no later than 9:45, 9:30. 2 hours later, I turned on TV on CNN at 12 o'clock noon, and I see Mr. Beerball of CNN interviewing John McGaugh, the head of ATF in Washington, D.C. And now he asked Mr. Beerball asked John McGaugh the exact same question I had asked in my living room 2 hours earlier. His question was, quote, Mr. McGaugh, based on the significance of April the 19th, did your agency take any precautions for that day? And this was real interesting because Mr. McGaugh's response was, yes, we were aware of the significance of April the 19th, and we took precautions at all of our offices across the country, unquote. Somebody was not being honest that morning, either the people in my living room or Mr. McGaugh, because those same two questions got two different answers.
In those articles, in those newsletters that they put out, those bulletins, they state that their agent in charge, and Alex McCauley, was in the building at the time of the blast and was riding down the elevator when the blast occurred. And they say this is a well-documented fact that he and an unnamed DEA agent, and we now know who that agent is, free fell from the 8th floor to the 3rd floor. Well, I think then the article, the bulletins go on to say that he managed to work his way out of the elevator and then saved a number of people. If you just stop right there and think about it, if you drop 50 feet, chances are both of those individuals' ankles would be broken. If anybody doubts that, go up, crawl up to a 5-story building, jump off, and just see how you feel. Now, it's an absurd cover story, and I'm sure they now regret it. But they're going to regret it a lot more for the simple fact that they didn't realize that there was 2 elevator repairmen directly across the street in the Federal Building waiting for a GSA inspector, because that was the very day that they were to have a safety inspection on those elevators. There were also 2 other elevator repairmen within 3 minutes of that site. They of course heard the blast, and on their way downtown got a radio message, and then another half a dozen of their co-workers for the same company were radioed, and so they all converged, and within 10 minutes they're all inside that building checking those elevators. So anywhere from 3 to 10 minutes passes, and you have anywhere from 6 to 10 men checking those 6 elevators plus a freight elevator. The bottom line is this, and after weeks of interviews with all of these different people, the bottom line is this: no elevator free fell that day. The only way you can make a modern elevator free fall is to cut the cables, and certainly none of the cables were cut. 5 of the 6 elevators were locked between floors because the doors were blown open, the power was cut off, so it froze the elevators exactly where they were. Once an elevator is in that situation, you can't open those doors. All of the elevators had to be accessed from the ceilings of the elevators, period. There is no way that any ATF agent or any other person was on those elevators that day. They weren't there, and no one else was there, period. So why is Alex McCauley telling this lie? I suspect it's because he's been told that somebody has to be in that building from ATF that day, because it looks pretty suspicious when the whole staff is gone. They had a secretary, 1 field agent, and 2 clerical people in there, and that leaves 11 agents